My name is Shmuel Lamm, and thank you for joining as we take a tour through chapter 124, Perek Chav Daled of Tehillim, Le'iloi Nishmat Mayan Sarah Saref Gabat Harav Nachum Umindel. Perek Chav Daled bursts with a passionate intensity, where the psalmist remembers the past crises of Israel and acknowledges, in really overwhelmed, appreciative terms, how we were spared only by the grace of God's salvation. Now, this theme of being spared by God's salvation is a familiar one that really runs throughout Tehillim. Yet the psalmist here employs very powerful and very haunting, but also curious imagery that I think we should explore and can use to derive a deeper message. And the psalmist writes, Lule Hashem shahaya lanu b'kum aleinu adam. If it had not been for God when man rose against us, azai chayim b'la'unu b'charot apam banu. Then they would have swallowed us up alive when their wrath, when their anger was kindled against us. Azai hamayim shetafunu, nachla arval nafshenu. Then the waters would have overwhelmed us. The stream would have flowed over our soul. And when we scrutinize this language of being swallowed whole and drowning in turbulent waters, when we scrutinize this language, the question really leaps out at us as to why the psalmist chose to employ these images specifically in the first place. We've seen really throughout Tehillim before the linguistic versatility of the psalmist, the fact that they can come up with a whole array of imagery and poetry. What is it about this imagery specifically? What common theme runs through it that would make the psalmist use it all at once and link it together in a single place? And the Dat Mikra alludes to a possible thread that runs throughout the Perek. The imagery all alludes, he says, he mentions not just to a threat of death or destruction, but something more, of complete, utter annihilation, of total destruction. The first image of being swallowed alive, of being swallowed whole, is similar to drowning in violent, turbulent rapids of a river, in that in both cases, the death leaves no trace. The person disappears forever, down to the last particle, never to be seen again, without even the remains by which to remember him, to be remembered. And now, if this really is the common theme of the imagery, of that it's supposed to show total annihilation, then we can still ask a follow-up question, and that is, why does it evoke such passion in the psalmist? Is getting torn messily to bits alive somehow any better or different than getting entirely swallowed alive? Perhaps we've arrived at the link, but we still need to describe why the psalmist felt like it was important to include that theme in the first place. And of course, both getting torn to itty-bitty tiny bits and getting swallowed alive are gruesome, awful deaths, but really perhaps there is something that's especially tragic of disappearing without a trace. And what's so tragic about that really has to do with a core idea in Judaism, that within Judaism, we have been commanded by God with a sacred task. And this mission is to fulfill to perform his mitzvot, and to make the world a more godly place. But this mission is not just that, it's also directed beyond our own lives and beyond our current times, beyond to those of the next generations, of the future generations. We strive not just for our own lives and for our own good deeds, but also to plant seeds and to leave a legacy that can flourish far into the future. Meaning this is why we place such a high emphasis, for example, on education and on raising children of the next generation. It's for that exact reason, the importance of preserving a legacy into the future. And perhaps it's in light of this mission, in light of this theme that runs through the core of Judaism, that we can give, of our Jewish life, that we can give one possible explanation as to the imagery in our Perek and the passion that really pervades and accompanies it. To what does swallowing or drowning allude? To the complete and utter destruction, not just of the body, but of the nefesh, of the soul. It represents more completely than any other idea the catastrophic failure of our mission to God, of the failure that could be, of the termination of our legacies, and the disappearance forever of our service and our purpose to God. And really, how often have we as Jews faced such threats of annihilation? It's all the time, whether physical or the threat of assimilation, which indeed many Jews face nowadays as well. And what the Perek celebrates so deeply is something that's deeply ingrained in our consciousness and meaningful to our mission. That we should thank God that despite our failings and despite our personal struggles, through God's salvation, we do leave a legacy for our children and for our nation. And this is a legacy that's really inscribed in promises throughout Tanakh. Then the words used by the psalmist at the end of the Perek, we can always know that Nashenu kitzipor nimlata, mipach yokshim, hapach nishbar v'anachnu nimlatnu. Our soul escapes as a bird out of the snares of the trappers. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. That God has helped us slip free of the snares time and time again, from complete entrapment and annihilation that constantly threatens us, that constantly looms. And instead, He's preserved us so that we can spread our legacies of serving God in this world. And this Perek reminds us to give thanks and to give appreciation for that ability, to appreciate even further the link, even further not only our ability to create a chain through the next generation of Jews, but also the importance of creating and treasuring that chain, whether it's our own children or youth or adults, to anyone who we can reach out to in our lives in order to strengthen that bond, which will last forever. Thank you, and have a good night.